Welcome back to Joe Stunner Boxing. Gary Antuanne Russell came in to his WBC interim super lightweight title fight with 17 wins and 17 KOs, no draws, no defeats. He took on Albert Puello of the Dominican Republic, 29 years old, 22 wins, no draws, no defeats, only 10 KOs though. And guess who won this one? Well, it wasn't the banger. It wasn't the bull. It was the Matador. Alberto Puello wins a split decision over Gary Antuanne Russell. And it's considered an upset. But, I mean, if ever you had a bull versus Matador scenario, it was this one. Because Russell, he's the banger. 17 wins, 17 KOs. He's looking for the knockout from the word go. He wants to keep whether it's a subconscious thing or a conscious thing, he wants to keep that streak going. But he certainly has the mentality of someone who comes forward and hits hard and loads up and wants to take you out with every punch. Okay, nothing wrong with that as long as you don't go looking for just the one punch. You've got to have some technique. And when we talk about technique, Albert Puello, I mean, he showed such a calm demeanor, such a positive, disciplined mentality under constant pressure, that it was a sight to behold, to be honest with you. And at no point was he really ever hurt by Antuanne Russell, even though Gary Antuanne Russell was firing his usual heavy hands. Puello was able to slip and slide and counter beautifully. Very often, Gary Antuanne Russell would motion to throw, say, a hook, for example, and he'd get pinged by Puello. By the way, I should point out both these guys were southpaws. So you had that sort of mirror thing going on, but I mean, it was from virtually the word go. It was the bull, which was Russell, coming in. He wasn't entirely crude. There was some technique. There was some feints going on, but he'd move in. There weren't a lot of angles. He wasn't able to control the range or control the angles much. Most of that was coming from Puello, who was, like I say, slipping and sliding. Didn't mind if he was on the ropes, no problem. If he got into a corner, he'd skid out the corner. At one point, it was the old scenario where he skidded out the corner, and in one of the earlier rounds, and Antuanne Russell sort of almost fell into the ring post. And he just constantly popped, counter-punched. Really beautiful performance by the Dominican Republic guy. I mean, I'd seen him fight before, but I got to be honest with you. He didn't have many wins over recognisable names, but he'd been 12 rounds previously, 10 rounds. You felt he had a good gas tank, and that it was going to be more of a mental battle rather than a physical one. Because at the end of the fight, he was absolutely fine. I mean, he paced himself beautifully over 12 rounds. The question was, could he control his own emotions, his own doubts, perhaps his own fears? How was he going to be with 36 minutes of pressure on him? And the answer was he performed brilliantly, absolutely brilliantly. Now, it wasn't that Gary Antuanne Russell did anything sort of drastically wrong. He basically just got outboxed. It's called boxing, not fighting, for a reason. And his technique was a bit wayward. I mean, when you look back, he only had one stoppage, which was a rather controversial one, over 6 rounds, and that was against Victor Postel back in 2022. And Postel protested that stoppage. It was in the 10th round of a 10-round fight. Yeah, Postel was losing, but he was fuming to be stopped. He stopped Rances Bartolome in 6 rounds. That was also in 2022. But when you get used to all this sort of, to just the power always being there and always getting you out of jail, I think it's almost inevitable that your technique will suffer. And that seems to be kind of what happened. And you could tell he was so desperate to land hard punches. He just couldn't live with the slickster that was Puello. Puello was just too crafty, too intelligent, a step ahead, a punch ahead. They should give give points, I think judges should, for defence at times, because the guy who imposed his style of fighting onto this fight was Puello. It was not Russell. And one of the judges, absolutely shockingly, had the one that voted for Gary Antuanne Russell, had it something like 118, 109, something absolutely ridiculous. 10 rounds to 2. Now, Puello did have a point taken off for holding, which I thought was very, very unfair. I think that was in the 9th round. I didn't hear any warnings before that, but the referee stopped the action, took the point off Puello, and then he just went straight back at it. He just went straight back to doing what he was doing and pretty much dominating the fight. Sometimes you just have to say, look, the better guy won. And if I was Gary Antuanne Russell, I would be saying that. I'd be saying, look, I won rounds. He did win rounds. But the other guy just, he imposed his style on the fight better than me. He landed more punches than I did. He had a higher ring IQ. You've just got to hold your hands up and say, sometimes I didn't really do anything wrong. I just got beaten by a better guy and I can come back, which he can. I mean, he's only 28 years old, for Christ's sake. This was a battle of unbeatens, and that's his first defeat. But for Puello, bear in mind, Carlos Adames also won on the card. So Dominican Republic have done really well tonight. But for Alberto Puello, I mean, this is a terrific win, absolutely fantastic win, and a real scalp to have. And he's definitely proved that even though he's fought lesser men in the past to sort of pad up his record, he's proved that he can live with a very, very good super lightweight in Antuanne Russell. So I think both these guys, they rematch. No, maybe not. It wasn't. It was an entertaining fight, and I mean they're both. I think Puello's 29, Russell's 28. So I wouldn't have an immediate rematch, but yeah, it was a good fight. Not a great fight, but a good fight, an intriguing fight, and definitely, like I say, one of those matchups where it was the contrast of the styles was so striking. Bull versus Matador. It was a pure, perfect example of that type of matchup. And on this occasion, the Matador skewered the Bull. But be interesting to see how far further Puello can go. But what did you think of this fight? Were you impressed with Puello, as impressed as I was? Because I was very impressed with him. I thought he answered a lot of questions. Leave your comments below. And as always, of course, subscribe to the channel if you're new. If you could leave a like, that would be great too. You help the channel out a great deal. Doesn't cost you nothing, and it takes a second, doesn't it? So, I'll read your comments. I'll answer them. Thanks a lot, and bye for now.